Give you that announcement. My name is Pastor Guy Roberts. I'm joined here this evening by the pastoral team from Zion Lutheran Church, Pastor Bruce Nennig.
Good to be with you again.
And Pastor Dan Abrams.
Good evening.
As well as Sarah Sigelski, our ministry coordinator here at Zion.
Hello.
It is a blessing to be together again to spend some more time visiting. We're going to be moving all the way over to online presence and podcasts. And so we'd love for you to join us on those. We'll get information to you in order to subscribe to our podcast once we kind of figure that out. But as always, you can access these broadcasts on our YouTube channel going forth. It's been a joy. I think we are celebrating 20 episodes that we've done since we started this, and we hope it's been a blessing to you as we have gathered as a congregation and spent time in His Word reflecting on life and faith. And so I just want to kind of let you know of that on the front end. That this will still be available, but you'll have to access it online. We'd love for you to join us and to engage with it as well. So your questions are always desired, and you'd like to ask a lifetime question, you can go ahead and text me at 218-850-1239. You can post it there on Facebook, and we'll be able to see it. And then also you can email us at zionlutherandl@gmail.com. So let's go ahead and get started. What do you got for us today, Sarah?
So I wanted to start by asking about bad habits that we have in our marriages, parenting, our family relationships, and coworkers, and just some examples that you guys can think of those habits and those different relationships, and your advice on how to go about working them out.
Are we talking about our own, or are we supposed to tell each other's bad habits?
Just kind of in general.
Very general.
Very general. Ones we've observed over the years, maybe. Yeah, because our marriages are perfect, so that's not an issue. We definitely got it down 100%.
Yes.
Right?
You don't live in my house.
Yes.
Yeah, that was sarcasm. For all who are watching and listening, that was sarcasm. Bad habits.
Okay, so let's start with marriages. What are some things that you can think of are just in general bad habits in marriages that people have, and your advice on how to work those out?
I don't know if you'd consider it a bad habit. It's something if you don't do, it causes difficulty, is not to talk about things, not to have communication. Really wouldn't go, but sometimes people have a tendency not to do that. And you could call that bad habit. It's something that, so that in order to not do that, you kind of work at that. You have to work at that more, So to me, that's a possibility.
Yeah, but Emily and I teach a class called Love and Respect, and we work with couples who have been married for a long time, those who are looking to get married. And one of the things we evaluate, as we were evaluating our own marriage over the last 20 years, was that when we first got married and we'd have conflict, my first reaction was to literally leave the house, get in the car, and drive away. And that's what I did, and that's exactly what you're talking about. That conflict was and communication. I just would literally leave the situation, and that was a very bad habit on a lot of levels. And maturing and through those first couple years of marriage, we just made the decision that we would stick it out. We would stay in the same room. And it doesn't always go smooth, but we would work through that, whatever it is. So
I know June and I always talked about, and most times we did this, we would go to sleep mad at each other and just make that happen. And sometimes, obviously, over the years you don't do that. And you never really sleep as well either that way. So
yeah,
that whole communication piece is so vital in any bad habit, and I think we can talk more about why we hang on to bad habits too. And I think that'd be an interesting thing to hear from you guys as well.
And a couple things that come to mind for me is in the realm of communication is communicating schedules. Letting the spouse know where we're going and not assume that they know what we have going on in our life. The other thing that comes to mind is the realm of finances. I come across way too many couples who my money, your money, and that they don't have the whole concept that it's our money. And if they have to communicate over our money, that eliminates a lot of issues because they have to make decisions together then. And if
Yeah.
they're making them separate and keeping their money themselves opens the door for a lot of other bad habits that could evolve because there's deception and secrecy going on.
Yeah, I plead with couples not to do that when they tell me they're gonna have separate finances. I'm like, please, 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 do not do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have no stake in their game, but I'm just trying to help them. Yeah, it's like, imagine this with when you had a brother or sisters and you're growing up and they cut a cake. And they cut the cake and so your so-and-so brother gets a bigger piece of cake. And what's gonna happen in that relationship is they're gonna be like, that's not fair. So-and-so got a bigger piece of cake. Now imagine that in marriage. Like, you're paying more of the bills, I'm paying more of the bills than you are. It's not fair. You're not holding up your end. And all of that gets taken away
Yeah.
when there's different struggles, but you don't have those same conflicts. So that's a really good one.
And I think the other thing too, I know June and I have talked about over the years it's been sometimes she had more time to take care of the finances, sometimes I did, depending on where we were and whether I was at the seminary or what. But anyway, we found it important that even though one person was doing it, the other person would be at least periodically involved so they would know
Mhm.
because it's easy for the person who's filling out and writing out the checks to feel responsible if there isn't quite enough there, and that happens to all of us at different times.
Yeah.
And so that way it is our situation. It's our money, but it's also, we feel like we're in it together, looking at it the same side rather than in the adversarial way. So.
That makes it we decisions rather than you decided, we're in this position because of what you did.
Yeah.
This is what we did. We won together, we failed together.
Yeah. It doesn't mean easier necessarily, but it is definitely better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would add to have two of these. One is one that Emily and I talked about before we ever had kids and really talked about and decided on, which is we were not going to criticize one another through our kids. And well, Dad said that blah, 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 or Mom said that blah, 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 blah. And I see this a ton in other families when I was working with youth, which is why we decided before we ever had kids. And that's been something that every time we get into that mode in our family, where we're doing that, where we're kind of like backhanded criticisms through other kids, it goes bad and it puts kids in an impossible situation. So in marriages and raising kids, I see that all the time, where one spouse is angry at another and they use their kids and their conversations with them in front of their spouse to like get their digs in. And that's that's taking a bad situation and compounding it.
Yeah.
And then the second one probably flows out of all the ones we've talked about, and this is the one that is probably, I think, the most important when it comes to marriage, is if you get in the bad habit of saying things like, that's okay, I'm fine, it's fine, just drop it, you're in trouble. Your marriage is gonna have some serious struggles. And the Lord gives us guidance about what forgiveness looks like, saying those words, I'm sorry, to your spouse, and receiving that forgiveness, I forgive you. You cannot underestimate how important that is. And I would say it happens in very few relationships as a regular pattern. And it's one of the greatest gifts the Lord gives us in our marriages to bring about new life, and we just don't employ it. So literally every wedding sermon I preach is that message, because I know I have a room full of married people that need to hear it again.
Right.
And so that would be the two that we would add to the list.
Yeah, most every marriage counseling situation I've dealt with where there's trouble, that's my first question. When's the last time you forgave one another? And they said, we've never done that.
Yeah, it
I
happens.
said, that tells me why you're here.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the cool part is when you introduce this to a couple that's been married for 5-10 years and they try it, it's like revolutionary.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's crazy. It's not like it's hard. You're taught that in kindergarten to do that, but yeah. The other thing I'd throw out there for anyone who's listening, especially, we probably don't have a ton of people listening that are younger and just getting married right now, but you know people that are, and you need to tell them that they're not going to be good at this. Like, marriage is hard, and you're not going to be a rock star at the beginning. There's no young 20-year-old prodigies. Marriage is just hard. And so that's what, I don't know if it's a habit, but that's what I tell people to over and over and over. Cut yourself some slack. There's a lot for you to learn. And a lot of it will be learned the hard way. So,
Yeah.
So I think in summary, it'd be pretty fair to say that the number one thing, I guess, would be communication. That everything you guys kind of said boils down to proper communication with your spouse.
I would actually say that the number one thing is forgiveness. But communication, you could maybe label that communication, but it's not really the same thing. Because communication is talking through it, which you should do. But that's a close second.
Mm-hmm.
But forgiveness is something different. Like asking for forgiveness and forgiving is a giving of yourself both ways. It's a sacrifice of yourself for the sake of the other. So that if I was going to emphasize one thing that has to happen and that definitely needs to be there in a marriage, that would be it. And then obviously communication. Yeah.
I would say that communication can also help facilitate that forgiveness in the sense of if you're communicating, I think the chances of saying I'm sorry and I forgive you are probably better if you're never talking. Obviously, it's a lot harder. So that would be the tie-in. But ultimately, knowing that you're forgiven, you can know that too. I mean, what was the old saying? Love is not needing to say I'm sorry. But that really, we do need to hear that at times. And to say I'm sorry, I guess if that's someone, probably I don't do that as much.
You don't say you're sorry?
Not as much as I probably should be. I don't want to. So, I mean, and I think about that, but I am. I mean, but so having the setting in which you can do that, and I think communication, talking with one another, you're more likely to say that than if the zone of silence is kind of there.
I think you should start with forgiveness, and then communication will flow. Every time it's tried, it works. It's like directly from Jesus, and it's because it's a denial of self. It's like starting with confession and worship service. So you're all twisted up with your spouse and you're backwards. The perfect place to start, the Lord's way to start, is to, will you please forgive me? I know I've hurt you. I forgive you. And then she forgives me. And now we talk through this. It's like it's a different thing than communication. I think sacrifice of yourself. You're literally saying there's nothing I'm not worthy of, even this conversation, which is a much easier way to enter into your communication. Does that make sense? Yeah, deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me, and there you are in the midst of, you've already admitted that you're at fault, which I think is the joke for every husband at a wedding, right? Did people tell you that at your wedding reception?
No.
The only lesson you need to know is she's right and you're wrong, just take, and everything will be good from there. You guys didn't hear that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
Not at my wedding reception.
Yeah. Sense?
But, yeah,
Okay.
I've always told couples that the three most important words are I forgive you. They're more important than I love you, simply because forgiveness shows the depth of your love.
Yeah. And it's an action. It's not just a statement. There's something happening in those words that we can't quantify. It's a God thing.
The next topic, as far as bad habits, what you guys think they are and what they need to do in order to try and work on those, would be bad parenting habits.
I'll jump in. The number one, no one who is listening right now is going to disagree with this, and they're all going to be, every one of us is going to be, feel guilty when I say this, but phones. They are the worst. Like, they're a blessing to us and a gift in so many ways, but I go around town, it's true of me too, so if you're hearing this, but you'll see parents at the park with their kids, and they're parked on the bench, they're facing their phones while their kids play. You're in the store at a restaurant, you'll have a family sitting around a table, and they're all on their phones. These phones have, even though they've connected us in ways we've never been connected, they've also isolated us in ways we've never been isolated, and I am chief of sinners on this. Where I could be doing stuff with my kids, and I'm doing something dumb on my phone, and that is a horrible habit we've developed as a culture, and it is what it is. I mean, yeah, I can't imagine not having my phone, so that might make it an idol, actually, more than a bad habit. So
I I think a poor parenting habit is saying I'm too busy to have devotional time with my children, to model the faith, to teach the faith, to have prayer time with them. Because if they don't learn it from mom and dad, and mom and dad says the church will do that for me, that's a huge, huge mistake, bad habit.
Any advice on how to work on fixing that?
Get in the routine of setting a time, of first having the materials and agree as a family we're committed to this time. And it doesn't mean it'll happen every day because family schedules are crazy, but even if they did it 3 times a week, it would be awesome, But Satan likes to put up roadblocks to prevent the time frames, and so it takes work to develop that and be committed to it as a family.
I'd add to that the opportunity, even when you're busy, like in your sports and you're running from here to there. One of the things that I try to help people see is teaching the faith doesn't have to happen in a formal setting, like at 9 a.m. in the morning. You should do that. You should be having devotions with your kids, a time set aside, and go into regular worship. But like your kids get in sideways with some other kids at hockey, you got a 10-minute, 15-minute ride home from hockey to there, where rather than to be on your phone, you should help them debrief that. What does the Lord have to say about how we react to these situations? And so the teachable moments are there constantly. And usually we fill that time up with other things that is ridiculous. So it's a both and. We should do some formal sorts, like Pastor Bruce was saying. But get over whatever's going on and realize that they're right there, teachable moments every day. They're watching you, and that's an opportunity as well. So
I'm trying to think of what it was like before the cell phones, which I can remember back to. You probably can't.
I didn't have a cell phone until I was at seminary.
Oh, okay.
It was awesome.
Okay, but how did we do it? How did we have this bad habit back there? Because kids, we've always had, and part of it is spending the time with them, or spending, they always call it quality time, to be aware of them. And you can be distracted by anything. I think the cell phones have made it much easier to, and maybe part of it is seeing this is an opportunity. And this was the thing that God has given me. My first vocation was with my kids. I mean, one of the most important is with your kids. You have your job, and quite often I think it's probably the job that distracts, and then you're tired, and so maybe that was what we had to overcome at that point, is finding the time. And it's so easy not to. I mean, and so you have to be conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you mentioned in devotion this morning was the idea of accountability. And to have that situation, whether it's the spouse that helps you, and sometimes that's hard, or to have somebody else, where you can talk freely and just, you're going to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're not going to be judged necessarily, but it's a way to be accountable and be reminded of it. And maybe that's what we need. And so anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I don't want to be that old grumpy pastor that's like, oh, cell phones are the root of all evil.
Yeah.
They're not. They're just a thing. The root of all evil is our hearts. So if it wasn't cell phones, it would be something else.
Yeah.
And and it was something else. That's a good point. Before, I can't remember what it would have been back then, but I'm sure it was something. Yeah. Well, and it can be even good things. That's like I've watched parents with their kids not give any time to their kids because they're so busy with working out. Like they'll spend hours and hours and hours every day jogging or working out or nutrition. So I mean, it can literally be anything. And again, it's not obviously working out is a good idea. So it's the evil that flows from us is what causes this. And that accountability, I think, is really important. Dan and Sarah, you asked about how do we, break these habits. That is an incredibly important part of breaking any kind of habit, is to follow the patterns of breaking addictions, which is first admit you have a problem, and then surround yourself with people who care about you and will hold you accountable. And that sounds like the Christian church, to be honest. That didn't just get made up. That's where that teaching came from, is the Christian church. So, yeah, it goes back to that forgiveness stuff.
Yeah. I was gonna hit on to what you already said. We take for granted the time we have with our kids, and we have other priorities, whether it's our own sport activity, or whether it's our work world, or whether it's our friends, and the kids quickly pick up on that. I'm kind of down the road somewhere. I'm not as valued to my parents. They have time for everybody and everything but me.
Yeah.
You know?
So hobbies could turn into that.
Yeah.
Work, which is good, obviously, could turn into that. Yeah.
You know, and I think to realize that our kids are such a high priority. I mean, that's such a privilege. And some people, you know, they only one kid, they're going to get in the way. Or if they're there, they say, well, I deserve my time. Yeah, we need our time. But at the same time, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Number one thing, you know, as far as life is taking care of our kids. Yeah.
So that actually brings up a really important question I guess I've had, and I see this online, and I just kind of want to know your guys' feedback on this. I see, different posts about how I can't be a good parent until my needs are taken care of, and first I take care of me and then I take care of them, that kind of thing, and about putting yourself first, and how if you're not putting yourself first and taking care of yourself first and foremost, your kids and your spouse and whatnot, they're not getting the best version of you. And I just kind of wanted to know what you guys feel about that. Like, is putting yourself first and taking yourself first something that we should be doing, or is that completely like the wrong way to look at it?
Okay, I got this. You ready? That's a load of
Selfishness.
Yeah. It's first time I heard that was from Oprah Winfrey. It was Dr. Phil, I think, was on her show before he got famous and had his own show, and he's like, you can't love others until you love yourself, and all the crowd was like, yeah, that's so true. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really good. That should be on a t-shirt. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I follow the Lord, who does not say this. He says, you give of yourself. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, to love your neighbor as yourself, and we don't even make the list, And so this is true, definitely true within parenting and marriage and every other relationship. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and that's the way of his people. And what you'll find is we really don't. Listen, I'm going to pause and caveat. There are people who have severe self-esteem issues and problems and mental illness and all that kind of stuff. But in general, we do not have a problem loving ourselves. In fact, we give the most of our energy to ourselves constantly. And we actually have to be motivated the other way to give of ourselves. And so, I would say just try it out in your marriage. Put yourself first before your spouse all the time. See how that works out for you. Put yourself before your kids all the time. See how your kids turn out. And there are plenty of examples all around us of that. And so that's my answer.
I would add to that one of the most helpful things I got from a prof in the seminary. He says, look at the relationships, priorities God gives to you in life. First it's to God, then it's to your spouse, then it's to your children, then it's your work world, then it's your leisure time. And he said, whenever one of those leapfrogs over another, you will have conflict in your life. And we all have had conflict in our life, because some of us have leapfrogged in my life over others, and it causes conflict.
Yeah.
And when you're at peace with God, spouse, children, work world, things go much better.
Yeah.
But our society puts leisure so often. We're at the top. Me first. What I want.
Always me first. And that is, man, it's just a recipe for disaster. No doubt. Yeah. I'll add another one on there that maybe stir the pot here, and you probably won't like this if you're listening out there, but I hear this all the time, at least I did. I don't know, no one says it around me anymore because I've probably commented on it enough. But they say, I live for my kids. And it's like, wow, that is a horrible idea. And that just shocks them when I say that to them. Your first priority is the Lord. Your second priority is serving your spouse, and your kids desperately need that. And you're like, well, my husband can go do whatever he wants, or my wife can go. I live for my kids. And it's like, wow, tell me how that works out for you in 10 years. That's not only a horrible example for your kids about how marriage should work. But kids they are built for structure and for security and for rules and boundaries, and that's what they need. And when you become their servant, you flip all that upside down, and you need to teach them. God would say you would need to teach them that they belong to a larger world, and it's more than just about them. We get a bunch of narcissist kids raised in that kind of world. So
Kids get the most security when they know Jesus loves them and they know mom and dad are secure in the relationship. That supersedes the phones, everything else you give them in life.
yeah, and here's a good habit if you're out there and you're married and you have kids in the home. A good habit is to, if you're going to fight in front of your kids, which you will, is to forgive one another in front of your kids, so that they see that. Don't do that behind closed doors. They're listening, watching, and learning, and that'll help them in their own marriages someday when they know that this is the goal, is to come and to reconcile. So
The next question I had about bad habits with family relationships, and by that I mean with siblings, parents, bad habits that we have, and how we can work to fix those.
To me, when you first asked about the idea of different areas, I was thinking it's going to come back to kind of the same place each time on those bad habits. We have many vocations. One of our vocations is to be a sibling, too. But the same principles can apply there, of forgiveness and forgiving one another, of taking that time. It's going to be at a different level, different, because spouse and kids, there's going to be more time spent. I think one of the ways maybe to solve with siblings is the opportunity isn't naturally there as you are with your immediate family because you're around more. And so you might have to be more intentional of reaching out to that situation. If the Bible talks about if you think someone's kind of unhappy with you, you should make the effort to go talk to them, not necessarily wait till they come to you. So that'd be another way to break that. But
And that's important because the amount of times I've seen, especially with siblings, once you all have left home, is, with your own family, you have no choice. You have to interact with them, but your siblings, they avoid one another. And the amount of times I've come across families where I haven't talked to my brother or sister for years, or they've checked out in our family, so we just don't talk to them anymore. And you got to be intentional to stay in contact with them. I recall as a DCE, we didn't have a pastor, and I had to plan a funeral with a family, and I walked into the room and I couldn't get them to talk, so I went in the kitchen and asked the lady who was there, what's going on? She says, you got to realize these people, they're relatives, some siblings, they haven't talked to each other for 25 years, and you're trying to plan a funeral with them. Wow.
So let's start with an icebreaker. Oh yeah, that'd be tough.
I would like to maybe be more specific too, as far as bad habits that we have as kids to our parents. Just kind of to get people thinking at home who are listening, like, you know what, I should maybe talk to my parents about this.
That's a tough one because I'd say most bad habits that kids have, I wouldn't blame on the kids. I would blame on the kind of surroundings and boundaries parents have put in place. Now, I know there's exceptions to that with mental illness and the like, but in general, you can, when you sit and meet with the family and the kids are really disrespectful or, talk back openly, or I'm trying to think of bad habits, have a bad diet, let's say, and are suffering as a result, but their kids will only feed them, macaroni. Their parents will only feed them macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets because that's all they'll eat. You know what I'm saying? So those bad habits are, I'm not sure I would, obviously the fourth commandment, disrespecting and not honoring your parents, but I would say that's usually equally at fault with parents as with kids. So,
Sarah, were you talking about somebody who wanted to work on a strained relationship, or
Yeah.
more so?
Yeah.
Because then already you've got the idea of the person wanting to. You're talking, Pastor Guy, about someone who probably isn't even. They're aware of it, but they don't care enough or whatever for the relationship to do anything about it.
I'm talking about, like, you'll hear parents complaining about their kids'
Oh.
bad habits, and when you visit with them for a few minutes, it's pretty obvious why that exists. It's not because their kids are inherently evil, although all people have sin in them. It's just because they have set up really bad boundaries.
Well, even more, what I was kind of getting at is strained relationships between like adult children with their adult parents.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, there's a risk to it. I mean, you're going to have to put yourself out there. I mean, you're saying that's an important relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It may not change. I mean, a lot of times God asks us to do things without, if it doesn't change, that still is a good thing to do and try.
Yeah.
If you've gotten to that point to say, I know there's something wrong here, a lot of times you have, from one generation to the next, these bad habits, and then you try and break the cycle. And it's going to be very difficult for that future generation if they're not where you are wanting to do something. Sometimes, sadly, that never takes place.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, to me, I would say, try it, reach out. It might be several years, but there's nothing wrong with reaching out. You're not going to get hurt most of the time.
And unfortunately, if it's the child trying to talk to their parent, the adult child, too often the adult parent still looks at their child as a child, and they aren't always willing to receive direction, advice, suggestions. Who are you to talk to me? You're my kid.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you shouldn't try, but I know I tried that a couple times with my mom in a relationship. I saw my mom and dad. It got nowhere.
No progress. So there's always tactics and things you could try, whatever, but at the end of the day, your parents are who they are. Their struggles probably aren't going to change dramatically. And so when I've counseled people on this issue, especially those who are children and they're more like the adults in the relationship, they're all adults, but they're more like the parent, and it's kind of switched areas. But regardless, you gotta realize that we're called to bear with one another in love, have some compassion, and to learn to forgive even when they're not sorry. To let that go, and that's what I see as a bunch of unresolved conflict within people that makes it impossible for them to love the good stuff about their family, whether it be siblings. And so now everything that is done under that shadow or shade of this one thing, or multiple things in some cases. So, but if there are truly family and it hasn't been some level of hurt that's completely destroyed the relationship, there are also good things there. So.
And I think by reaching out, you keep that door open. The time might come for that parent when they finally realize. Same thing with children. Sometimes you'd want to help the child. Sometimes they have to learn the hard way. And by caring about them, that keeps the door open. If you react in kind, they'll probably have to open 3 doors, and they're never going to do that. I mean, they're all so vulnerable and they're so weak in it. Make it as easy as possible. And that's what you're saying too. You can forgive. I mean, forgiving is healthy for us. I mean, if their lack of it, and that just hurts us. So you can forgive somebody. I've had that opportunity with somebody. You can forgive them. In fact, you shouldn't let their attitude keep us from forgiving them. We need that. But that's also going to, I think, provide an opportunity for them to look at you as someone that they've never done it, but boy, you're at least giving them a chance to reach out to you.
And we can't change anybody, but we plant seeds, just like the gospel. We've never changed anybody, but we plant seeds of thought and pray that God uses it.
Yeah. And we live in a disposable society. The problem is relationships aren't like that, especially with family. It's a for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health type of a deal. And so that's kind of where we got. That's what I remind people. But I also apologize, especially kids who are working with parents that are acting more like the kid. Like, I'm sorry it's this way for you. You're supposed to have parents that you can rely on and trust, and that provide that place for you to go. but your parents aren't perfect, but it doesn't make them any less your parent. And so that's, sorry this is your lot, but,
Yeah.
suck it up, buttercup. I don't say that, just on the radio.
Or to one of us.
To one of you, I've said that numerous times.
You have said that to us.
Never Bruce, just you.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
So, bad habits with coworkers.
Pass. In all seriousness, the things that I've been taught over the years that I've found to be helpful is you can work with anybody if you choose to trust one another, if you learn to ask forgiveness and to forgive one another, and if you stay in the conversation, talk it out. It's a lot like a marriage, actually. So, and I think that would be true of all coworkers, but for sure true among church workers.
And my observation as I began in church work as a director of Christian education, I saw this and I've seen it ever since. For church staff to function, they need to meet together regularly, they need to pray together. And when I've seen church staffs not work, I've asked them, so how often do you meet? How often do you pray? Well, we meet once a month or every couple months whenever we feel the need to. It takes weekly contact, communication, like I said. About like marriage, gotta have regular communication and contact and pray together and work out things together.
Same team. That's the
Yeah.
same team here.
And it's important that you have a respect for that other person. You don't always agree. You don't have to be the same.
You don't always agree with Guy?
No, but you do need to respect.
Yes.
And that's important, and trust. And that is part of it. I mean, and if that isn't taking place, then you need to find some way to address that, because that's a barrier. If I can't trust, again, I don't have to agree completely in it, but you're on the same page. And as a team and an office, it depends what your role is. I mean, if it's a peer relationship, it's your boss, there's all sorts of different things. The boss respecting the employees. I mean, there's so many ways that can go wrong simply because of our broken sinfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also ways of making it happen. I found it in having a staff relations committee or group where we meet as staff, but also we meet with people in the congregation. And we have opportunity for them to support us and to challenge us in a safe environment, because we had that here when we've done that, and I've done it at a couple of churches. And the important thing was I believed that these people had my best interest at heart. And if you have that, you can make a lot of different types of people work well together.
Yeah, and that's hard because they didn't always have your best interest at heart.
What's that?
They didn't always have your best interest at heart, though, but you chose to believe that they did and start there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, but by communicating, by spending that time together, you found out, and having my best interest at heart wasn't always agreeing with me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I respect the person. You needed that accountability but the safe place where they could say in and you could talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have a multiple staff situation, you certainly have to have that. And I think, somebody facilitates that.
Mm-hmm.
Senior pastor, probably.
Yeah, or each individual.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, you can only control your own actions, and when you get a whole team that's coming to one another when they're frustrated or struggling or whatever, and then they're forgiving one another, that's the good stuff right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so another question I wanted to ask was, through this 20-week series of our radio podcasts, what has been your favorite question that was asked, or your favorite topic in general that we talked about?
When I think about that, I'm not sure if it's the topic as much as a solution, but relationships. To me, in most of our conversations over the time, all the things we've talked about, relationships have been a very important thing. Mm-hmm. And what that means, in terms of forgiveness, and what it means in terms of, but again, and of course communication. But if you have the relationship, you're going to want to communicate. So, I mean, that was the thought thought that comes to my mind when you ask that question.
I don't know if I can remember specific questions, but my favorite episode we recorded is the one with the kids. That one was my favorite. Their questions were awesome, and it was just fun to hear them and to just see them in front of microphones engaging, and then to hear them on the radio that was pretty special.
And nothing in particular comes to mind. I've thought about it since you mentioned that, and I think I did enjoy personally the interaction we had when it was the three of us and Caitlin in that one segment, and there was some good interaction for the staff, some subjects that went on there, and some of the goofiness that came out as a result of it.
Did the three of you learn anything from each other, or like any different information as we've been going through this? Like, what did you guys learn from our radio podcast series?
Learning new, I don't know how much new, some things, but I think more being reminded of things, how things can be done, and we're at different points in our ministries, and to see how each one deals with those different things, But yeah, I think being reminded of, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, whenever you get together with pastors, and at least when I do and visit, it's fun to hear the different language they've developed over the years to talk about the same things that we all know. And so that's been enjoyable, especially with some of the outside guests we've had and the way they teach on certain subjects and the like. It was neat. And I'm sure I've incorporated a lot of that. I just don't know I can't think of any specific examples.
And for me, it's just probably getting to know one another better, within the staff, how you perceive things and understand by listening to their insights. That's always helpful, because on a daily basis, we don't talk about all this stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah, we don't just sit and ask each other's questions. I will say that overall with this whole experience, and again, for those of you that are joining us the first time or maybe just recently, this all kind of was inspired by conversations that were happening in the office with Sarah when she started on staff here. And she was somewhat inexperienced in the life of the church and had tons of questions. It's been neat over the years to get a perspective that we don't necessarily see anymore, which is that a lot of things we do are strange unless you've been raised within them the whole time. So why do we do different parts of the service the way we do it, or why do we gather or do this or that? What is churchy terms that people who are in church know but no one else knows?
Christianese.
Yeah, Christianese language. So that was good for us in general. It's been good for us over the years, because now Sarah's becoming one of us. So there's not quite as many of those opportunities, but a lot of your questions that you've turned in have been just a real blessing to us. And we want to just stop and give thanks for all of you who are listening and who've been joining us on this radio broadcast. It has been a joy and a privilege to be here with you together. And over our time, again, you can continue to access and listen to this on our podcast. Subscribe to that, or YouTube, Zion DL. If you go to YouTube and type in Zion space DL, you will find our page, and these will be recorded for you to continue to listen to. But overall, the stuff we've been doing here was for you. We hope it's been a blessing for you to continue to learn and grow, and we're always available by phone call. Drop by the church. Pastor Bruce Nenning, Pastor Guy Roberts, Pastor Dan Abrahams. If you need to have any questions about faith, life, or anything, feel free to drop by and visit with us. We'd love to receive you. So with that, we wrap up our 20th and final episode on the radio of Ask the Pastor. It's been a good job. I'm going to give you claps. Very nice. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us so many different times. And let's go ahead and end with a word of prayer. Gracious Father, we praise you and we thank you for a chance to be together here again as your people, to learn and grow, to struggle through this life that you have called us to, but doing so in the hope and victory of the cross. We pray, Lord, that all who have listened over the last 20 episodes, 20 weeks through this COVID pandemic will have been blessed. And Lord, may we continue to be blessed in our time together in your word, reflecting on your will, your grace and mercy in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.